Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to NEWSROOM. I'm your host Khalid, but today is Monday, the 18th of September 2023, and these are the stories that we will try to decipher during the course of this show. We'll begin, ladies and gentlemen, with the live transmission of the full court proceedings of the Supreme Court of Pakistan. That is a first as far as Pakistan's history is concerned. It has happened in 5 other countries across the world, but for Pakistan as a country since 1947, since it became independent, this is the first time that the proceedings of the Supreme Court have gone live. They were going live since earlier this day, and they continued, and now of course they have been adjourned till the 3rd of October. All parties are to submit their replies concerning this very important Supreme Court Practice and Procedure Act 2023 petition by the 25th of September. Now we will discuss different aspects of it. The importance of televising this petition against the Supreme Court Practice and Procedures Act 2023. Was this a special case to televise this? Will this be the norm in the future as well? What were the important points that were discussed? Because the whole nation and also a lot of other nations in our region were glued to the screens to see how our Supreme Court basically functions and what were the to and fro's that were going on in this eminent court, and that is what we will discuss during the course of this first segment. Our second story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns the basic issues that exist between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Now, the main crossing between Pakistan and Afghanistan has been reopened on a Friday after having been shut for 9 days. At the same time, our caretaker Prime Minister Mr. Anwar al-Haq has also written a written reply to Afghanistan's interim Prime Minister Mullah Muhammad Hassan Akhund. Of course, this was in response to the felicitation message that was sent earlier by the Afghan Prime Minister on his appointment. What are the basic issues that exist between Pakistan and Afghanistan? Why is a country like Afghanistan, that Pakistan has been helping since decades, now more or less acting in a hostile manner when it comes to Pakistan, when it comes to whether it be infiltration of hostile elements or terrorist elements from the Afghan soil into Pakistan, whether it be the skirmishes on the Torkham border and other issues? How can this be brought forward between the two countries in a way that these issues can be sorted out? This is going to be our second segment, and then finally we are going to talk about the issues between Canada and India. Now, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who had come to India to attend the G20 summit, was stuck in India for 2 days after the end of the summit due to a breakdown of his private plane. But this was not the only issue that was being highlighted by the Indian press and also the international press. The fact remains that Canada has suspended the ongoing negotiations on a trade agreement with India. A spokesperson for the Trade Minister of Canada has confirmed that Canada has suspended negotiations for a bilateral trade deal. At the same time, India is not very happy with the way the Khalistan movement has been gaining momentum, especially in Canada with the referendum also taking place there. So there are a lot of issues between Canada and India. Will this move towards some kind of maybe truce, or some kind of discussing the issues and coming to a mutual agreement? That only time will tell, but we will highlight the issues that have come up between Canada and India in our third story. Let's begin with our first, and that concerns the Supreme Court of Pakistan, the live proceedings that everybody saw today, and of course we were all glued to our screens because we had never seen how a full court works, especially when it comes to the Supreme Court of Pakistan. And we were at this one end mesmerized by the way the whole thing was going on. At the same time, we were trying to understand what the basic nitty-gritties of our constitution are and what was this petition against the Supreme Court Practice and Procedure Act 2023. To discuss that and more, we've been joined by Barrister Yasser Latif Hamdani. He's a legal expert. He joins us in the studio, and of course his speciality is constitutional law. Thank you very much, Barrister Saab, to have joined us. Barrister Saab, first of all, a live transmission of a Supreme Court proceeding for the first time in Pakistan's history. As a lawyer, how do you see this? Do you feel this makes the whole issue more transparent, this makes the whole proceeding more transparent and more accessible to a general public?
I think it's the question of accessibility is the most important one. The very fact that now the public could see what goes on in courts, and this is a very serious undertaking. The debate today, I think those of us who followed it could see what a momentous sort of an occasion it was, because you have a Chief Justice who's sitting there in judgment on whether or not you're going to have, whether or not you're going to curtail the Chief Justice's powers. I think that's a very significant thing, because it is probably, the question really is, does the Parliament actually have the power to do that? I think the court seems to lean towards saying yes, it does.
All right. So also the fact remains that this is a very important case, and of course I understand why it was decided or requested that this be televised live. What is in fact this petition against the Supreme Court Practice and Procedures Act 2023? Could you explain it for our general public?
Exactly. So essentially what's happened is that the National Assembly and then the Parliament as a whole had introduced certain amendments to procedure. Now, under Article 191 of the Constitution, the language that is used is subject to Constitution and law. The question that is before the Supreme Court is whether or not rules can be made by the Parliament in addition to the rules that have been made by the Supreme Court. Supreme Court made rules in 1980. Now the argument of the petitioners is, since those rules were made, those hold the field, and that the word law does not include an act of Parliament. Therefore, the Supreme Court should turn around and strike it down, because it's beyond the legislative capacity of the National Assembly or the Parliament for that matter.
What is the leaning of the Supreme Court as far as the proceedings that we have heard all day today?
I believe that there is general feeling amongst the judges, most of the judges. The Supreme Court right now, we know, is a very diverse Supreme Court. But the feeling that I got listening to the judges, and which was kind of predictable as well, is that a lot of these judges want the discretion that has been vested in the Chief Justice to become structured. So therefore, what the issue is, essentially what the Procedure Act, the Practice and Procedure Act does, it says that instead of the Chief Justice deciding whether to take suo motu under 184(3) of the Constitution or the constitution of benches for that matter, because remember, this is a debate that is globally an issue of contention, major contention, whether or not the Chief Justice is the master of the roster.
Are there other examples as far as the Chief Justice taking suo motu action is concerned across the world?
Well, there is Chief Justice, not just suo motu, but first let's talk about the benches.
All right.
Right, that is the most important. Remember, United States of America, the Supreme Court sits as one, so it's like all 9 judges sit together as one court. Then you have in India where the Chief Justice is the master of the roster. So there's that. In United Kingdom, there's the Chief Justice of the Royal Courts, but then there is a Supreme Court which has a president, and the president decides the benches. Right? So generally speaking, that discretion has been vested in the head of the court, as it were. Now, what our assembly or our parliament tried to do, and I think it was a very positive thing, and I think even the petitioners today admitted, if you heard the proceedings, the petitioners admitted that it was actually a good law, just that they didn't believe that the Parliament had the legislative capacity to do so, but the law itself was a welcome one. And the reason is, it structures the discretion that the Chief Justice has by adding 2 more judges, right? The three senior most judges sit together and decide. So it's become a collegium of sorts. The collegium now decides whether or not a certain issue will be taken up as a suo motu thing or not, or whether or not the benches that would be constituted, where would the cases go. So that discretion has been divided. So it's become, as the argument was from the government side and those who have promoted this bill or this act, the argument has always been that it has democratized discretion. It has democratized the Supreme Court, and I think that's a very important. Now, the petitioners argue that by basically curtailing or cutting the wings of the Chief Justice, you are actually attacking independence of judiciary. That's the argument that the petitioners give. From the looks of it, majority of the judges on that bench, including the Chief Justice, seem to feel otherwise. They believe that by making it a structured discretion with 3 judges instead of 1, that's a positive thing, and that does not attack or does not infringe on the independence of judiciary, which is a salient feature of Pakistani constitution. Independence of judiciary is a salient feature which cannot be overridden. Therefore, they believe that having structured discretion that puts 3 judges instead of 1, just the Chief Justice, then that actually does not violate the principle of independence of judiciary. So I think the court is very much leaning towards actually not striking down the law, but actually upholding the law as intra vires, as in within the constitution.
All right. Tell us a bit about the Article 184.3.
184.3. 184.3 is a special jurisdiction. It's an extraordinary jurisdiction of, you can call it a constitutional jurisdiction where where matters of public importance as they relate to fundamental rights and so on and so forth can be taken up by the Supreme Court either sua sponte, which is by its own accord, or by on the basis of a petition that might come before it under 184.3. Now the problem with this was that there was only review there. There wasn't so there isn't an appeal. Now what this law does, it actually provides an appeal for it.
All right.
And that again, has been an issue. A lot of people who oppose the law feel that giving an appeal would create logistical issues, like for example the one issue that kept coming up all day today was, what if the entire Supreme Court as it is sitting right now, for all 15 judges, there are 17 judges but right now there are 15 judges, all 15 judges, if they're sitting, where would the appeal go? So that is the legitimate point, but I think I think that can be resolved. That's not necessarily because what the Attorney General said, and I think there was a lot of weight in what he said. The Attorney General said that once this has been done, once the law goes into force, the committee of judges, the three-member committee of judges, which includes the Chief Justice and 2 senior-most judges, they would by themselves constitute a bench, knowing that tomorrow it might go into appeal. So they would probably constitute a bench of 3, 5, 7, still, which could be challenged at a by a higher before a higher number of judges. So I think that was an argument that kind of held water, and I saw the judges who because a lot of what happened today, if you looked at, this is very interesting, because this was obviously, some of us have obviously gone to this.
But for laymen like us, it was a first. It
was definitely a first, and there were several things that because let me just say the acoustics at court number 1, courtroom number 1 in the Supreme Court are really bad. So watching it on TV is actually better than being there.
All right.
Right. So now there at one of the things that you might have noticed, which was so the judges, the brother judges as it were, the Chief Justice and his the rest of the bench, they don't argue with each other. This is something you might have noted.
Yes.
So how do they argue with each other without arguing with each other? They go through the counsel. So the questions that were being addressed to the counsel on both sides, including the Attorney General, but also Khwaja Tariq Rahim and Imtiaz Siddiqui, those questions were actually judges' way of expressing themselves and expressing dissent. So you might have seen Justice Muneeb Akhtar, asking these pointed questions, where he was like, Mr. Attorney General, my intervention is not theoretical, it is so that sort of thing, so on and so forth. He was actually responding to what the Chief Justice had been saying earlier. So there's always been this thing about the law, right? And this is why this makes the whole televised proceeding so amazing or awesome, as it were, is the fact that you are seeing high drama, right? And that's the thing with law, is a lot of people who become lawyers started off
exactly
and they wanted to be actors, right? the biggest example being that of Quaid-e-Azam, who wanted to be an actor and then became a lawyer. So I think that whole high drama on TV, you know, that's why you have.
But there's a lot of articles, the whole constitution is backing this, this drama, isn't it?
And it's internationally, globally, you have court TV, which is separate.
Yes.
You know, so I think it's a. I don't see all court cases before the Supreme Court landing up.
But of course, this case was an important one.
Exactly.
And it was the first day in office of the new Chief Justice of Pakistan. And that is why it makes this whole case even more important. And the fact that it was being televised, you know, to all the audience who had access to television in Pakistan or maybe even abroad, made it even the more exceptional.
Exactly. And it was a historic day. I think it's set a very good precedent. I think the Chief Justice, the new Chief Justice, Qazi Faiz Isa, was the right person to do it, because we always expected that there would be some innovation coming in, because he's a jurist of the highest caliber, in my opinion. I mean, people can agree or disagree. But he's also someone who wants to take justice to the doorstep. Right, and that's precisely
accessibility, basically, and
yes.
people understanding what this whole system of the judiciary is all about, especially when it comes to Supreme Court. We hear it we read it in the articles, we hear different people's points of views who've been to the court, but we never see this firsthand. And I think for a lot of people, this is a first-hand experience of how things go on in the Supreme Court of Pakistan. The parties have been told to submit their replies before the 25th of September. Why is there then a break between the 25th of September and the 3rd of October? What happens in between?
Well, a lot of so the petitions that are there are about 20 petitions that were filed against this particular law, and obviously the principle audio alterum partem requires that everyone is heard. You know, that so they're going to a lot of the counsel, for example, one of the counsel I know is abroad. So he's obviously, you know, so they've put up this date so that there would be maximum replies and submissions from the parties, everyone who's involved in the case, all stakeholders get on board, and then they would give everyone time to prepare and have final arguments on October the 3rd.
All right. Now, on the October the 3rd, as you yourself said, you know, there's a certain inkling of what you have as to what is going to be decided. But normally, decisions like these, do they take as short a time on petitions as big as these, on cases such as big as these? Normally in the Supreme Court of Pakistan, do they take that short a time, or is this also exceptional?
Well, it is exceptional, but I would say that if you look at the international scenario, it's not exceptional.
Okay.
Right? Supreme Courts generally do come back in a shorter period of time, and I think what was extraordinary and what was sort of unprecedented was the time that they, you know, took in hearing this case. I mean, it went on for good 7 hours, 8 hours, something like that. So it was, you know, that's unheard of.
Is it normal procedure to you know, hear a case for that many hours, or normally there's a certain fixed time limit?
Generally, cases are not heard this long. Now, this is the longest I've heard a case go on. You know, and I've been practicing for a while. So I think, yes, for me at least, this was unprecedented. But this shows the commitment that the Chief Justice has to actually getting it done, right? Because a lot hinges on this, right? Because unless and until this case is resolved one way or the other, we don't know how benches can be constituted. Because the Parliament has already shown its intention. You know, it says, let's have structured discretion. But if there are suo motos being taken by the Chief Justice in absence of that, in absence of, like it was being done when there was a stay order on it, I think that creates a constitutional issue.
All right.
So I think in order to resolve that issue, you need this particular thing to happen, to this case to be resolved. So this was, at this time, before this Chief Justice, the most important case that could have come up.
So in your point of view, there could be a decision taken on the 3rd of October?
Maybe not the 3rd, but yeah, I would imagine that the Chief Justice wants it out as soon as possible. So yes, there is a possibility there might be a short order.
During the proceedings today, I'd like to quote something that Justice Qazi Faiz Issa said. He said a law was sustainable unless proven otherwise, saying that the burden of proof was on the one who challenged the law in this case. What does he want to say when he talks about this?
Exactly. So the idea is that the legislature, when it makes a law, the presumption is that they have considered all the issues. In our case, the constitutionality of it, that is its intra vires, that it does not violate fundamental rights, and in our case, because of our status as an Islamic republic, we also have the additional burden of the legislators have to make sure that any law that is made is not against Islamic provisions. So all of those things, now if somebody is going to challenge a law, they have to show that one of these elements was missing.
All right.
So they have to either show that the fundamental rights are being violated, or if they will go to the federal Shariat court, for example, they would talk about religion, you know, and so that sort of thing. So the burden is always on the petitioner in these cases. He has to, there's a judgment called the Imrana Tivana judgment of the Supreme Court. It lays down the guidelines for how a law might be struck down. Because the ultimate principle on which we proceed in a parliamentary democracy is that the parliament, though there's a lot of debate about this, so I say it, you know, with trepidation, the parliament is supreme. You know, the argument here in Pakistan is that no, it's the constitution that is supreme. Still, it's the parliament that makes the constitution. So since the parliament can make the constitution, the parliament can make laws. Remember, even the number of judges that are there in the Supreme Court are there by an act of parliament. It is an act of parliament that determined the number of judges in the Supreme Court. If the National Assembly can do that, it can certainly also tweak the procedure of the court itself, the practice and procedure of the court. So I think that, so most notably, not just Qazi Faiz Issa, but also Mansoor Shah Justice Mansoor Shah also said this, that the parliament in this case, and also Justice Athar Manila for that matter. So if you were, the general trend was that they were saying that there is parliamentary sovereignty and they don't want to infringe on it by striking this down. They say that since parliament has, so the argument is that the parliament has legislative capacity and legislative ability to make these laws, and that is particularly, and that is the nub of the matter. Essentially, the case turns on that. Does the parliament have legislative capacity or not? The argument of the petitioners is that it does not, because the legislature, in this case the parliament, and the judiciary are co-equal branches of government. So therefore they can't interfere in each other's, that's the argument of the petitioners. However, that is not how the constitution structures it. 191, I think when it uses the word law and constitution and law, it means an act of parliament. That was another discussion that happened, whether law means an act of parliament or not. This was something that was discussed at length, but I believe as someone who's looked at the law, that it does include an act of parliament. So there's that. And then when you look at other countries, and especially the one that we sort of, you know, looking at Bangladesh or India, the closer countries that are closest to us, that is the case. The parliament does have a role to play. The parliament can tweak rules and procedure and stuff. So that is my opinion. I don't want to prejudge.
Of course,
anything.
I understand.
Yes.
I understand. Thank you so very much, Barrister Yasser Latif Hamdani Sahab, to have joined us here and to have talked to us about this very important matter, that is the petition, the set of petitions that are challenging the Supreme Court Practice and Procedure Act 2023. And what makes it even more important is that a layman who was sitting in his room or in his house or in his office or in his shop could watch the entire proceedings as if he was watching something, any other program. And the most interesting part of it was it was a very important case that hinged on the democratic values of the courts and the parliament, and that it was live with the full court with the 15 judges, as you yourself said, made it even more important and pertinent. And I think the Chief Justice of Pakistan has set a very important example with this very first case on his very first day officially as the Chief Justice of Pakistan. Thank you very much, sir, to have joined us. It was a pleasure to have understood the nitty-gritties, the judicial nitty-gritties of what constitutional law stands for. I hope I'll get you back very soon to further understand what constitutional law is all about. Thank you very much, sir. Let's come to our second story, and our second story concerns the relationship that exists between Afghanistan and Pakistan. A lot of twists and turns when it comes to that, a lot of issues when it comes to that, whether it be the Torkham border, whether it be the infiltration of terrorist elements from the Afghan territories into Pakistan, whether it be other issues that concern both Pakistan and Afghanistan. The fact remains that Pakistan has helped Afghanistan like no other country has in the last few decades, and the fact also remains that we've got millions of Afghan refugees that are still present in our country, Pakistan, and that are still living a normal life. Our caretaker Prime Minister did respond to the interim Prime Minister of Afghanistan's letter congratulating him on becoming the caretaker Prime Minister. Will this letter and this to and fro might create a thaw as far as the relations between Pakistan and Afghanistan is concerned? Will Afghanistan understand the way to move forward is to work around these thorny issues and to do the needful? We've been joined by Brigadier retired Mahmood Shah. He's a senior analyst, to discuss that and more. Brigadier Saab, thank you very much to have joined us. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
Brigadier Saab, when you look at the whole tangent of Pakistan-Afghanistan relations, and when you see what has been happening in the last year from the Afghan side into Pakistan, what isn't going right as far as the Afghan perspective is concerned? Why, I mean, I'd like to understand, why are they not doing the needful? Can they not do it? Are they deliberately not doing it, or is there some other thing that is, deliberately causing this, how should I say, wrecking of the relationship between Afghanistan and Pakistan?
Thank you for inviting me to speak on this important subject. Actually, Afghanistan is a destabilized state, and it has the potential of destabilizing Pakistan if we are not very careful about our dealing with such a state. You saw that there was an attack which got initiated across the border against our post in Chetral. And I think there was some tough talking done by our army chief, which has had its effect. For example, now Afghanistan has arrested a few people who were involved in this attack. 10 to 15 of them have been arrested, and initially 12 or 13 were killed by our own forces. And in the process, our 4 people also embraced Shahadat. So there was an religious attack from their supreme leader, Habatullah Durrani. But he is a reclusive man and probably does not have much control on the state of Afghanistan. But I think this tough talking and our attitude, because even that, what happened in Chetral, most of the military officers who are retired conveyed to the GSQ that our troops should have followed them into Afghanistan and should have killed all the what you call themselves TTP wala. So I think this attitude has now borne some fruit, because Afghanistan government has arrested some people, and I think the message coming across is always in diplomatic words, which their Prime Minister said that Afghanistan and Pakistan are brotherly countries and people are brotherly. So this is all very good, and I think our Prime Minister replied in the same manner. But at the same time, we have shown our concern regarding our borders and the attacks which are initiated from there. and the previous government showed a weak stance by initiating some sort of negotiation with the TPP people, because our constitution does not allow talking with any group of people who have sort of fought a sort of war against the state. So they shouldn't have had any negotiation with them. But now the government is very clear, and I think announced that the negotiation will be only with Afghanistan government. That is a sovereign state talking to another sovereign state. And I think whosoever are trying to create problems, they should be given an appropriate reply in terms of action. For example, they did something wrong at this place, Torkham, and the border was closed. The fire was returned with fire, and I think they have learned the lesson, and I think that's how our attitude should be.
All right. Now, Brigadier Sahib, I'd like to also understand this straining of relations between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Is Afghanistan the major player to be blamed for it? There are a lot of aspersions as to the fact that the Afghan Taliban have been harboring TTP and other terrorist organizations. Is there any truth to it in your point of view? Do you feel that they could revert this point of view or this decision that they have taken regarding the harboring of terrorist outfits? Do you feel that they could have an in-house cleaning, so as to say, within Afghanistan? Is that possible?
Yes, it is possible. They should tell us what we are required to do. If they want to try them for the charges that we found to them, we can send our lawyers to plead their case in whatever courts they have, and they can. The second is that those people can be asked to surrender before the state of Pakistan, and here they will be dealt with as per law. And I know that our courts are not very not good in giving punishments, but whatever they at least are put through the process, so that the people who commit crimes against the state know that you will be dealt with according to law. So I think this is what we have to give the message, and the Afghan government should be able to help in this. And if they cannot, they are responsible for whatever happens in their borders, and nobody should be able to attack another state. That is how in Doha agreement, this has been specially mentioned, that you will not be able to, you should not create some problem for your neighbors, because it was well known that these Afghans can create problems for other states in the neighborhood. Americans did not do this. America is not a neighbor of Afghanistan, but he knew the concern of the neighbors of Afghanistan.
That is true. Brigadier Sahib, last question. Do you feel that that Pakistan has done way too much from its side as far as Afghanistan is concerned? Maybe Afghanistan has started or had started to take Pakistan for granted. Do you feel that the Afghan transit trade should be re-looked at, be reconsidered as to the mechanisms that enshrine this Afghan transit trade? What's your take on that as well?
Yes, I think whatever is happening, as I initially said, that Afghanistan has the capacity to destabilize Pakistan. There are so many Afghan refugees who are roaming about. This Pakistani rupees is circulating in Afghanistan markets as the second currency. And they bring all that money here to Shah and on the other side to Quetta and Karachi, and they purchase dollars from these money exchangers. Those dollars Afghan government uses to make purchases from other countries, where in our case it is only an informal trade. Afghanis are coming and they can purchase anything in the market. They have the rupees in their hand. And for example, we say we do a lot of exports to Afghanistan. Okay, what good those exports are, because with the export you want to get international currency. That is, you want to get dollars, and they are taking dollars from your market. So on this, the Pakistan government has not taken action, and all the money changers have been arrested. Their shops have been closed only because of these Afghanis who come and take away dollars. And it is in millions that per day the dollars are taken across both at this place and Chaman. So the government had to take very tough stand on these things, and partly the army pointed out this, and they have a sort of task force to control this currency exchange.
All right. Brigadier Saab, thank you very much to have joined us, to have talked to us about Pakistan-Afghanistan relations in the wake of the reopening of the Torkham border, and of course the issues that exist between both the countries and how that needs to move forward, and of course that also includes the future of the Afghan transit trade. Let's come to our last story, ladies and gentlemen, that concerns Canada-India relations, not in fact. Justin Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister, was in India to attend the G20 summit. There was news when he was there that Canada had suspended the ongoing negotiations on a trade agreement with India. Then what added to it is that in June of 2023, of this year, just a couple of months back, Khalistani leader Hardeep Singh had been murdered in a market in British Columbia in Canada. Many countries saw scenes of increasing tensions between Sikh separatists and the Indian government. The fact that there is a referendum that went on as far as the Khalistan movement is concerned has also irked India. To discuss that and more, we've been joined by Dr. Saud. He's an expert in international relations. Dr. Saab, thank you very much to have joined us. Dr. Saab, is the relationship between Canada and India turning a new leaf, not for the better?
Well, thank you very much, Sir, for inviting me and to discuss onto this very important and ongoing development. Yes, of course, I think this is something unprecedented so far. India and Canada's relations are concerned. Although India blames that Canada is harboring, in fact, Canada is supporting, and in fact, Canada is, providing the basis onto which the Khalistan movement leaders, they are sitting over there and they are doing a propaganda, particularly against the Indian diplomats who have been deployed over there in Canada. But if you look at, the developments inside the Indian political structure and this, the Hindutva and all that, we have seen that over the period of time when Modi came to power in India, Hindutva and the, fascist kind of Modi regime, it had given free hand to the extremist elements in India to target all the minorities over there. So we see that, before 5, 6 or 7 years, this Khalistan movement, it was dormant. But since Modi came to power, it has come to the surface again. And we know that almost 0.7 million or 700,000 Sikhs, they live in Canada. And these Sikhs mostly, they support Justin Trudeau. And Trudeau has, a vote bank in the form of these Sikh community in Canada as well. But, the development happened when we have already mentioned the target killing of the Khalistan leader, Mr. Hardeep Singh, who was killed in British Columbia. It wasn't the only killing, but if you look at May 23, when Paramjit Singh, he was killed in Lahore. Similarly, Mr. Avtar Singh, he was killed in England in June 2023. So these two months, they have been very heavy for the Khalistani leaders abroad, who are living abroad, not in India. And we have seen that the Khalistan movement, it has claimed, it has blamed that it was the Indian government that is behind the target killing of these people. And, they blamed that the two Indian diplomats, Mr. Sanjay Kumar Verma and Mr. Opariovo Sarvastio, they are actually involved in the killing of Hardeep Singh. So there was a movement or campaign against the Indian diplomat in not only in Canada, but we have seen that movement in Australia and America as well, where the Sikh community persuaded rest of the Sikh people and international community to probe the killing of Hardeep Singh. Then we know
But Dr. Adam, where does this leave the ongoing negotiations as far as the trade agreement between Canada and India is concerned? Although they are suspended, but do you feel that there is some light at the end of the tunnel? Do you feel they are going to resume? Because apparently, as per the reports go, Narendra Modi isn't happy at all as far as the way Canada has been moving forward with the rights of the Sikhs and the Khalistan movement.
Yeah, you're right. But I personally think, looking at the volume of trade between the two countries, it's almost more than $8 billion per year. Similarly, we see that the Canadian investment in India is more than $60-70 billion. So keeping in view, such massive investment and such massive bilateral trade volume between the two countries, I don't think that the stand still, it would continue for a longer period of time. Although the Canadian government, it has called off the economic trade mission that was due in next month to India, and obviously it would have been a great initiative on the part of India and Canada bilateral trade, but they have suspended it. But personally, I think the things would get better with the passage of time. Maybe there would be negotiations. Definitely, there would be back-channel negotiations between the two countries, and they would try to resolve this issue because the volume of trade and the investment by both the countries, because there are more Canadian countries which have invested in India than the Indian companies. And if you look at the products which both the countries import and export, everything counts a lot. And I think this trade standoff, it would not continue for long period of time. Maybe after a couple of months, 3 months, 4 months, there would definitely be some positive developments. Nevertheless, this has this standoff and this old relationship between Canada and India have given a blow to the Indian outlook that emerged actually after this G20 summit, that India is it's a kind of blue-eyed country for the West, and it's going to have more and more trade and political relations.
Dr. Adam, last question. I want a short answer to it. What happens now to the Khalistan movement, to the Khalistan referendum that we saw happening in Canada? Do you feel that Canada will pay heed to India's objections as far as the Khalistan or the Khalistan movement is concerned? Do you feel there's going to be some kind of response as far as that is concerned, some development in that aspect, or do you feel Canada is going to have the same stance that it has had over the last year?
Well, I think the referendum is just symbolic. It won't make any difference because that has happened in Canada, not in India. Secondly, so far Canada is concerned, we know that Canada has its own constitution, its own laws, and pluralistic society is the key and it's the basic feature of the Canadian society. But I think, Canadian government and Canadian regime, it would obviously be more careful in future in order to deal with such kind of developments. Nevertheless, they won't, I think, forcefully be stopping such kind of referendums and such kind of rallies and protests that are being done by the Sikh community in Canada.
Of course, because that is part of any democracy, and that is part of freedom of speech, and that is what Canada also stands for. Thank you so very much, Dr. Adam Saud, expert in international relations, who have talked to us about the strained relations between Canada and India, as was quite evident when Justin Trudeau was part of the G20 summit. And of course, as per the reports go, there was some kind of tension between the Indian and the Canadian leaders, and of course, there's also the suspension of the negotiations as far as the trade deal between both countries are concerned. And then there is the Khalistan movement and the Khalistan referendum that took place in Canada recently. That's it for the moment. We'll see you inshallah tomorrow with new story segments that pertain to us, you in Pakistan. Stay tuned, stay safe. Allah Hafiz.